I'm not going to try and get any Wiimotes going today or tripping over cables or whatever. So I'm going to pretty much stand behind the podium this time because I want to show you what I think is some pretty cool stuff. What I want to talk to today is one side of things is I guess the high. I really like there's events in the browser now, and you guys are probably fairly familiar with using them. So I don't want to talk very much about them. I'll talk about one thing that I guess I found out later than I should have, and then I really want to challenge you to potentially rethink the way you use events and look at a library that I'm a big fan of actually. So essentially, events as we know them, they're bound to something. So, you know, whether it's we say button, add event listener, or if we go old school and we remember IE and things like that, attach event, and it's still there in IE 7 and 8, and I think they've got the new add event listener syntax in IE 9+. But essentially, this is what we're doing. We say add event listener. You know, we say this event name, and then we say event handler, and we've got this third parameter which we always see. And for the longest time, I just typed it. I was like, false. I don't know what it's doing. And then I started to wonder, or actually there was a guy in Brisbane who talked about it, and I went, holy crap, that's really interesting. So there's essentially two modes to capturing events, and I don't know how many of you guys know this already, but it's actually pretty interesting. The most common thing you see is essentially the false, which is saying, okay, we don't want to use capture, we're going to use the bubbling. Now, bubbling, so I've got just a diagram here which kind of explains like a very simple, what you might have seen in the DOM. So you've got the document, got a couple of divs, and you've got buttons. If you're bubbling events, and I was to click on the button, that would essentially traverse up the tree, and the button would see it first, the div, and the parent div, and then the document in the window. So a bit of JS fiddle to the rescue. I've got some HTML, which is pretty much like what I sort of talked about. Yeah, pretty much. A document, get element ID, blah, 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 all pretty similar stuff. It's going crazy. Don't scroll. Oh! Okay, I'm not going to touch the mouse. So there's stuff down there which I use to show you what's going on. So what you can see here, we've got button add event listener, handle event button. Now this is using a closure like Dimitri pointed out earlier. So it's just like, if you aren't using closures yet, start thinking about how you can, because they are awesome. And they just allow you, because you're like looking at this going, well, you're calling a function there, but in fact I'm actually returning the function to call. It's a bit of a mind job when you first start to see it, but once you use it, you're just like, oh, never going back. So if we run this, we'll see I've got my add and remove button. So if I click add, then what you can see is that the handles have all fired. I'm not going to do any of the prevent default stuff that you would normally see, like, because that's the opportunity to cancel the event bubbling and things that go on there. And I'm not going to talk about that today. So I'd encourage you to go read up on that if that's something that you need to do. And it is often if you're dealing with say anchor tags or something, and you want to do something in JavaScript. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Anson yesterday, was it, about the push state and handling things. That's a good case where you would say, okay, I'm going to attach the event listener, I'm going to handle a click, and rather than let it do its default action, I'm going to cancel that and prevent default. But you can see here, going back to what I'm talking about, and this sort of bubbling order, which is what we're normally seeing, is it hits the button first, the div, then the document, and then window. So this is the order in which it's executed. The capture phase is sort of top down. So essentially what happens is the document gets this, or even the window gets to see it first, document, and then it just goes down that way. So it's basically the reverse. This all actually came about, and I'm not much of a historian, but I'm sure if you find John in the right mood, he'll happily, no, in any mood, he'll happily tell you the backstory. But it's all about Netscape and I think IE were basically had two different models, and IE I think had, which was it, Jared? Bubble first, and then Netscape had capture down. So capture's essentially the reverse. It's not hard, and there are certain systems, like when you're seeing code snippets on the web, you'll normally see false. But there are instances where you might go, you know what, capture would be more effective for this particular situation. Like I want to know about it at the document level, or I want the document to see it first, and my button can see it later. So I almost don't need to click this because you know what's going to happen. It's the reverse order. So that's just one subtle thing about events now that's standing in the way of me talking about something I really want to talk about. So I think that's something you should absolutely have a look at and understand if you don't already, because it's pretty useful in some situations. My big thing is events as I see them today are caught in a cage. That's not good. We need to get these buggers out, and there's a lot more that we can do with them. And essentially, as I said earlier in the talk, all of these implementations of events, they do, you know, they mean they're bound to an object. So even though there's scoping and they travel up trees and other things like that, it's always about a certain object that's being targeted or has initiated the handler. And there are instances where I'm like, well, what if it was different? You know, what if eventing was this? And if you're in enterprise software, which is a bit of a dirty word, they've been implementing things like this, called message buses, which are kind of the savior of enterprise architecture in many ways. What if you were to build things like a message bus in your JavaScript app? Now, Dimitri actually has written a library that he doesn't talk about a lot, and it's in Raphael, and it's called Eve. And Eve is, for want of a better word, I think awesome, because it does allow you to create a much more loosely coupled application than it would if you were using traditional event binding and things like that. Understand, as you heard Dimitri talk this morning, that Eve embraces JavaScript to its fullest extent. So as you start using it, it will challenge you potentially in ways that you didn't think possible. It's really simple to use. This is the application I'm going to demo, and as you can see, it's pretty simple and doesn't do much. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, you know, I'm going to take this traditional event, this document add event listener key press. I'm going to capture the key, hand it to that handler, and I'm going to use the capture phase. And when I do that, I am going to map it to an Eve event instead. So what happens here is Eve is called Eve matrix.key. Event target is the binding. So when the handler is actually called, this will be the, so when I look at this will be event.target. And I'm just passing in an argument here of the from char code. So Eve is built in such a way, it is truly wonderful in the way that it will just allow you to keep bundling up arguments as you push them along, and those, and your handlers, those will be there to essentially do stuff. But we'll see those in a sec. So if you want to join, based on the how good the network was yesterday, I'm going to do a small demo called the black screen of awesome. Now Rob's helped me test this, and I'm hopeful it does work. Here is the black screen of awesome if you want to fire it up. Let me know if it works. We'll get there first, because don't worry, it gets better. And we'll see. The URL, I've tried to do this. This actually maps to the internal thing, so you should be able to go to snurl.com Eve demo. Yep, okay, you've got a black screen of awesome. What? Oh no, how good is it? All right. So what we're doing basically is we're saying, well, that's our app, and the whole reason I'm up here talking today about Eve is that we use Eve a lot, and it's changed the way we build apps in the way that you don't have to, like, the thing that you'll find. Okay, so let's go through this as kind of a case scenario. So you've built the black screen of awesome, and we all agree that it is feature complete. We don't need to do anything else to it. It's ready to ship. Manager comes in, Lumberg, you know, comes in and says, "Oh mate, you know, we need to add something there. It's just lacking something." And you say, "Well, okay. Well, what if I was to show some keys coming down the screen and stuff like that?" You go, "Yeah, that sounds awesome. Okay, well let's do that." So if you were to go back into this structure and say, "Okay, I'm going to add the keys," typically what you would do is go, "I'm going to go into my capture key handler and I'm going to add that somewhere, write another function and do that." But I want to, you know, what I'm trying to say is like, well, you've built your core application. That should be considered stable and tested to a certain extent. I don't want to touch it. So Eve is an excellent way of being able to provide you a mechanism for building a very good sort of eventing architecture, which you can drive through sort of plugins, I guess, for want of a better word. So our first extension is our simple motion extension to make our boss happy. And here we get to see the event handler in the first one. So you can see here we're running Eve matrix.key. We're capturing that because it's similar, captured by name. There's a few tricks which I'll show later. And we've got a key argument coming through there. So if we go back to look here, you can start to see Eve, yep, key, right, okay. So there's this middle parameter, this we're not going to use, but that's cool. Okay, so all I'm doing here is a bit of code that I've chopped out, but I'll enable it in the actual demo now. And let's pull the motion plugin in. So you can see I've written all of this stuff in a very additive way. I haven't gone back and revisited code. I just had this point at which my code will readily extend. So I've done that now, and I should be able to refresh the black screen of awesome. And you guys should be able to do this too. You should be able to tap your keys if you've got well, no, it doesn't need WebSocket support. Is anyone else being able to tap their keys and have things happen? Anyone? Hooray, okay, that's good. I'm just looking for a little bit of reassurance. And so yeah, we've done our job. We think, all right, we're done. Okay, let's ship this. Now we've got the keys going down the screen. We're ready to go. And then, boss comes in and says, oh, Damon, you've done well, but I really want this thing to have WebSocket support because I saw this demo and I think WebSockets are cool. All right, okay. How the hell are we going to do that? So one of the great things about Eve is it's got what's called wildcard event handlers. So our next extension, which is our comms, is going to be somewhat different. And this is already enabled. You guys have already running this. You've already connected to a WebSocket server, but it's not doing anything yet. So what's going to happen is this comms, actually you haven't because you haven't got the comms plugin yet. We'll do that in a sec. The comms plugin is basically saying I'm going to create the WebSocket connection. Once the socket's open, I want to handle all Eve events. And then, once again, this is a little bit of tricky code, but it's basically saying any of those events, I just want to relay them to the WebSocket server, and then the WebSocket server is going to take responsibility for farming those out to everyone else. That's its job. Now this is sort of loosely based on what Rob was talking about in terms of an efficient kind of format for sort of WebSocket communication. I've just got pipe delimited, I'm putting the argument. So it'll work for anything. Essentially I could put new Eve events in there and this thing would just start firing them through. And I've just got the one test there to say if this is equal to the socket object, then just abort. So you don't start creating this massive chain of event nastiness. And once again, there's a few things here. We're using the apply function. And once again, if you haven't seen apply and call and functions like that, grab me, Jared, anyone who's been up here talking about JavaScript and say, well, what is that? How does that work? What is that doing? So let's go back to, I'll just put the comms plugin in, which is should hopefully get us a pay raise. That's much better. All right, I'm going to the black screen of awesome now. What's going on? You guys pressing keys. So you guys are, it's mashy here. And this is the WebSocket. So all the WebSockets are doing is essentially you guys are pressing your keys, and what's happening is the WebSocket server is just pushing those back. And I haven't written anything specifically. I didn't make the motion plugin like WebSocket aware. I just relayed those events, and it started picking them up. And so I've liberated my events. They're no longer bound to objects. They're just scoped, and they're looking for certain things to happen. Yeah, good. Okay, well, I can't tell. And we're gonna start to cause some browser because these are all DOM elements. So as Jared said, we're hurting. What I'm finding frustrating is I can't determine which of my keys is, I might have brought the WebSocket server down. That could have happened. There it is. Whee! Refresh. We're good again. What the hell? Oh, I know, I ran make. And this is the final plugin, and it's essentially just color me lime. So if what I'm doing is this is sort of like a reactive one. It's basically saying I haven't modified the other plugin in any way. I haven't changed the motion. But what I have done is said on matrix key, I want to go in there, and if this is an instance of a WebSocket, as in it's a WebSocket, or not an instance of a WebSocket, as in I've generated it, then go into the last element that was added and then add a class so I can determine which one's me. The really sort of subtle, tricky thing here out of Eve is that what Eve does is actually return you a function or a closure that you can set an event kind of order. So what I'm doing here with this 10 is it's just an arbitrary figure, but it's basically saying, I want you to do this one after everything else. So it's pretty nifty there. And you guys might already be there, and maybe this thing's broken again. It's not the best tested server. Me and Rob, that's it. Refresh. So you should be able to see that your keys come up green while everyone else's come through white. I'll let you play with that till you break it. Now, so if you are interested in using Eve and you're thinking about like doing some of this stuff, which, you know, to be honest, we use this and it's awesome. Thing to remember is namespace your events. And I don't know if Dimitri's run away. Has he run away? Yeah, he's outside. When he first put this in Raphael, he had all the events as basically key, you know, drag over this. So essentially, if you, as another person, were to use Eve in your own library and to implement drag over events and things like that, you guys would start clashing. You know, you'd start picking up events. In his latest version, he's actually prefixed all that with Raphael. So, you know, when you start using Eve, rather than, for instance, my network comms handler should probably have specifically the Eve matrix.star to say, okay, only push those Eve matrix events. So I'm not, if I actually include another library which does use Eve and generates events, I'm not starting to just relay them to my WebSocket server, you know. And if you're going to use Eve, learn your JavaScript like what Dimitri was saying. I'm by far not an expert, but it's well worth getting in there and understanding how closures work and those kind of things because he uses them pretty extensively. And finally, embrace your freedom. This is all about, you can do stuff and there's so much more you can do. All this is available right now, apart from WebSockets. But this is in JavaScript right now, and you know, there's a lot of talk about it being a broken language. It really isn't. There's so much you can do, and some people like Dimitri have seen things in a different way, and they provide us libraries, and it takes a little while to get used to, but I tell you what, once you play with it, it changes the way you build apps. So your references, Quirks mode is a good reference for talking about the event order, info stuff, and history. And there's another GitHub project if you want to hack around with this, go for it. And there's slides there on GitHub too. So yeah, cool, thanks.